So for model security from an architectural standpoint, people are starting to think of what guardrails am I putting in there? How am I checking if a model is going to drift? It's going to hallucinate. It's going to have toxic results, right? So that is one whole framework that I have. In addition to where am I hosting the model? How am I calling the model? So there is a lot of architectural changes that are happening from the model standpoint, which is kind of the brain.
Some of the challenging questions are, if I enable ChatGPT or a Gemini or a Cowork or a Copilot access to my employees, what happens to the data and where does the data get stored? The by default, question is my data going to be trained?
You shouldn't be in a place where you have to choose security versus innovation anytime. And I think that's kind of been my principle because, and I'll use this multiple times, is like security is like a seatbelt. You wear it, it'll let you go faster.
AI adoption has accelerated incredibly fast over the last year. The testimonial to that was the AI Impact Summit here in India in February of 2026. Most enterprises are no longer asking whether they should adopt AI, but how quickly they can operationalize it across workflows, customer experiences, and internal systems. At the same time, sensitive data is now flowing through prompts, co-pilots, agents, APIs, and external models in ways traditional enterprise architecture were never designed for. We have been understanding this momentum with Skyflow and keeping you updated about the same. Today's discussion is really about the intersection how enterprises can scale AI safely without losing control of sensitive data. Let's jump straight into the conversation and action with our special guest today, Amrita Muktali, Chief Product Officer, Skyflow, and Karthik Shinde, Partner, Ernst & Young. Welcome to the both of you, and we're looking forward to learn from both of you and pick your brains. Now, we have to first jump into a topic, and I will introduce it also for the audience. The AI shift is happening faster than the governance. And Karthik, we would like to start with you first. From your conversations with enterprise leaders, how has the AI discussion changed over the last 12 months?
Well, the shift is happening at a breakneck speed. It all started with, how can we quickly incorporate AI into the workplace, which meant looking at the current set of business applications, what can be automated. I mean, on a lighter note, one CFO highlighted a concern saying, everyone wants to get their applications AI enabled, but doesn't really understand, how much token spend is going to happen for there. So it's a shift between, do I need just a plain Jane automation or do I need an intelligent AI enabled automation? So, but that shift is happening. At the same time, the underlying architecture of how AI systems are getting architected, that's changing almost on a daily basis. So that presents a unique challenge in terms of, one, how do organizations not just adopt to newer AI-enabled applications, but how do they adopt to the newer architecture, which presents probably a newer challenge on how systems need to be architected, which means how data needs to be plumbed into the AI and how AI processes it and then puts it further. Given all of this, I think after the whole EU AI Act came into place, and then on the India side, we have the new data protection and privacy law, the India AI governance or India AI framework, and the RBI Free AI Committee releasing a report on AI governance and how our systems should be architected, guidelines rather. Now the shift is actually post facto, right? Things have gone into pilot, things have actually gone into production, and now people are thinking, how do I need to put an AI governance and a policy in place? And well, the biggest challenge is everything is on paper from a governance and a policy perspective. How do you put that to operationalize and start controlling things, because that's the need of the hour.
Absolutely. So, from a simpler terms perspective, AI is in sophomore years right now, you can say. Amrita, to you, are you also seeing the same shift when it comes to architecture? Because what changes do you see in enterprises from, say, they are moving from pilots to real production in AI systems? Your insights on that?
I think, the architectures are changing. Any new technology comes, we are modernizing our stack, we are changing the architecture. For example, earlier we used to write business logic. Now we use models to think for us, to reason for us, and then build the agents versus having just chatbots. So if we think from an architectural standpoint to what Karthik was mentioning, right? We did pilots. And during the pilots, people are starting to think of what are the different architectures. Sometimes they start with, okay, I'm going to use platforms that exist because there are foundation models and there are open source platforms that let me build agents. I'm just going to plug it in. I'm going to try it out, look at how it works. And then sometimes they just push it to production without thinking more about it. And the biggest challenge that comes in from an architectural standpoint is scale and security. What are you doing about that? Because yes, it works great for one or two people, but then when you open it up to the organization, you open it up to the customers, how is it going to scale? What are the cost bases of it is also something people are not thinking about. Then when we get into security and we get into what powers these applications is data. So when you think of security, when you put something in production in any system today, right, we think of security, what are the different guardrails we need to put in? You think of perimeter security. How am I securing my systems first? Now, when you think of an AI system or an architecture, you can think of security in three buckets. There's model, there is your identity, and then there is your data. So for model security from an architectural standpoint, people are starting to think of what guardrails am I putting in there? How am I checking if a model is going to drift? It's going to hallucinate. It's going to have toxic results, right? So that is one whole framework that I have. In addition to where am I hosting the model? How am I calling the model? So there is a lot of architectural changes that are happening from the model standpoint, which is kind of the brain. Then we get into the identity, which is actually a little simpler right now because a lot of the identity folks are getting into agent identity and because the agent is going to have delegated access from the end user, so things like that. But then the most critical part that is happening is around data, because AI is useless without data. It's like blood or oxygen
Yes.
for it to breathe. And it is becoming an afterthought for a lot of companies. And when enterprises put these applications in production, that becomes the biggest security hole.
Yes.
Because an agent or an AI model moves at the speed of light. It thinks quickly. It can do things way faster than hundreds of humans. So imagine one piece of bad data in their hand, and the damage and the blast radius is huge. So when you think of like the architectural changes in enterprises, you have to think of security very differently. You have to think of scale very differently. Now, the data platform could remain the same, but how you feed the data into this application, agent, or system is very different, most importantly, from a governance standpoint. Because you may have one agent serving multiple users. How do you do those governance? You may have one agent having access to way more data. And now we are exposing unstructured data and structured data. So there's a lot of different factors to think about from an architectural standpoint.
Absolutely. And actually, that builds us to the natural section, which is coming up for us, which is the AI data protection model
Yes.
moving forward, because this entirely changes the ball game in
Mhm.
which we are playing now.
Yeah.
Why do you feel that the traditional systems are not really ready to take care of this sort of
Yeah.
data manipulation? Because as we know that AI moves through data systems very differently, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
So what does traditional security struggle with when it comes
Yeah.
to AI environments? If you can build upon that.
Yeah, it's a great thing, right? Because if you think of how we have moved traditionally, like long time ago, we used to have an application that's talking to a database. Fantastically simple. There's a user, there's application database, restrict what data it needs to get access to. We are golden. Then came data lakes and data stores. And yes, it's a little complex because now multiple applications are accessing the data. I am now taking the data that's in the data lake, sharing it, creating different reports and things like that. But there's some level of governance that we have added there. The key thing in both of these is these are deterministic systems. Now, when AI comes into picture, you have MCP servers, you have agents, you have models, you have end users, you have multiple agents talking to each other, you have RAGs, you have tool calls happening everywhere. You have no way to know what is going on. This is a completely non-deterministic system. So the traditional RBACs that we used to have, they break. They don't work. because we are now moving to a system that is constantly changing. You don't know what it's doing all the time, who it's acting on behalf of. And the speed of execution is so fast that if there is an issue, so let's say today there was an access of data that was not required or something pre AI era, you would do an alert, someone would get notified, they would come and, like, stop the damage. Maybe a little bit of damage in 30 minutes would have happened. If that happens now, gone. Within a matter of seconds, everything is leaked.
And everything's on cloud.
Exactly. So that is where, when you think of data and why traditional controls don't work, is they were not designed for AI. Because when we move from on-prem to cloud, also we had to redesign our security things. It's the same thing, because the places where the data is moving is different, how you are accessing it is different. And there is one more behavioral thing that's happening. We want AI to be powerful. We want agents to do amazing work for us. How can they do it? With the data, right? We start giving access to more and more data. Today they'll be like, no, I'm restricting access to this. After 2 months, they'll be like, oh, can this agent also do this other thing? I'll give access. And you forget about it. And then now slowly you have released a lot of sensitive information unknowingly. And the logs are leaking information, audits. So it's just a lot. I think this is a new architecture for us to understand, because there's memory, there's context, there's logs, there's traces, there's observability where data gets stored as we are using AI. So all these pieces, I know there's a lot of different components, but that's what makes it very difficult for traditional systems to work as well.
I mean, of course, it's clearly high risk, high reward, but then the risk is something that we need to estimate.
Exactly.
And that brings me to you, Karthik, because do you see that organizations are underestimating this shift they're taking it lightly perhaps? Because what are you seeing from an advisory and compliance standpoint with this situation that we are handling right now?
See, I was going to say a term, ignorance is bliss, but it's, uh, but sadly, it may not be just ignorance. It may be also a lack of understanding. And again, I keep coming back to the speed of change that's happening in the technology itself. And it's very difficult to keep up with that speed of change. Like Amrita mentioned, the architecture, it was, AI first, then came agentic. Now it's swarm, which means, multiple AI agents, and you look at
Yes.
Opus 4.8.
Yeah.
It's agentic workflows.
It's moving to
Yeah.
singularity.
Yeah. I mean,
It's not good.
the way things are moving, it's very difficult for anyone to start thinking security,
Yeah.
and start building security right from day one, into the application, right? So that's, I think, the first, I wouldn't say blocker, but that's the first challenge which anyone has who's going to deploy an AI system. And now it's becoming plug and play. Like you said, you want to build an AI system or an app, you have either the Google Vortex or AWS Bedrock or Azure Foundry. You can just spin off systems and start building on things, right? On-prem, again, you build out a local LLM and then you start engineering things, and it becomes very difficult for organizations to start thinking through security controls and things like that. All these frameworks exist that are great, but how do you translate that in a changing technology? So you have to catch a moving train, and at the same time,
Yes.
you have to buy a ticket, you have to, all of that, right? So it's that pace which is actually getting in all these complexities in which one has to really think through about.
Clearly. So that actually puts towards the challenge. And for this particular question, I would like to pick both of your brains. Is the challenge today more about limiting AI adoption or enabling AI safety? Because you can't stop, because as you mentioned, the train is moving really fast. But at the same time, you have to keep on enabling these safeguards. Your insights, perhaps.
I always say you don't have to choose. You shouldn't be in a place where you have to choose security versus innovation anytime. And I think that's kind of been my principle, because, and I'll use this multiple times, is like security is like a seatbelt. You wear it, It'll let you go faster and make sure that you're not going to die if there's a crash, right? So, yes, there's a little bit of more time that it takes to start the car if you're putting a seatbelt on. Similarly, if you're trying to innovate, if you put some of those security thinking, security guardrails from the beginning, it helps you move faster. And in fact, it'll help you with your innovation. And I'll tell you why. One of the things that is happening in enterprises is they are taking agents and they're saying, when you start your op, start with an objective, right? They'll be like, okay, setting up this agent. This agent is going to be an XYZ agent that is going to do the job of 10 people. So these 10 people I have can do more things. And I'm going to give it all of these, pieces, let's say HR, legal, finance, a couple of different things. They put it in production, the agent does nothing. They're like, I spent so much money. Why is it not giving you anything? You have not given agent access to your data because it has sensitive information you've not put the security controls. So now you're not seeing the ROI. You're not seeing the value of investment that you've done and all the results you saw in pilot or pre-production for that agent in production. And now this is why I say innovation and security go hand in hand, because now, because you did not put security, your innovation got halted. So if you had put that from the beginning, now you have this agent that's even more powerful, doing more and more things. So at least that's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah. No, and I think, some conversations that we've been having with clients, simple things like if you see the adoption rate
Mm-hmm.
today of an organization, even rolling out, say, a Microsoft 365 Copilot, right? Now, organizations have started saying, ki, let's give Claude co-work. Let's get Claude co-work inside
Yes.
the organization. You know how much time has it been? It's been like 2 years. 2 years in
Yeah.
AI means you have almost missed like 10 years
Yeah.
of the learning curve.
Yep.
Um, some of the challenging questions are, if I enable ChatGPT or a Gemini or a Cowork or a Copilot access to my employees, what happens to my data?
Yep.
What happens to the data and where does the data get stored? The by default, question is my data going to be trained,
Yes.
by these frontier AI
Yes.
companies, right? So these are some of the questions. Now, most of them don't know or have not realized, and I'll go back to my illusion point, is that they have not even seen what solutions exist today
Yes.
in terms of I can still implement a co-work or a copilot, tokenize all the data,
Mm-hmm.
mask all the data, or encrypt all the data, and then still make these systems usable,
Yeah.
in my organization,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they've already kept asking questions to big tech,
Mm-hmm.
to frontier AI companies, that what happens to my data, and they've got no answers,
Yeah.
right? Whether that data really goes and is used for training or is it stored somewhere and things like that. And the work has stalled. But have we seen what solutions exist today to enable us to get on this journey faster? I think that's where they should start
Yeah.
thinking on.
And it's becoming checkboxes, right? Like with the front end, I was like, oh, they've told me they're not going to use my data. But there is like sometimes they're like, what's the proof? Like, yeah, it's contractual, none of this data is going to get used. So it's that's an interesting conversation I keep
And
having
isn't
with
it
folks.
like, ironical that, when you start training, when you start implementing
Yeah.
AI, you start to realize that the LLM doesn't remember anything. So memory is a problem. And then on the other hand, you're saying, oh, is it retaining all my data? Is it? No, it's may not.
But now they're doing crazy things with memory where it's persistent memory. So
Oh,
it's going
yes.
to remember forever. So
Yeah.
it went from like not doing anything to now I don't know when it'll remember something, and after 6 months it's going to blurt out something that it
Yeah,
remembers,
yeah.
right?
I mean that's that's actually a good point, because as soon as you start implementing a
Yes.
persistent memory,
Yeah.
data is going to be
Data is a short term.
absolutely
Exactly.
critical,
Yes.
because it's not just about prompt injection or someone, but there could be malware which could be listening to your
Anything.
in-memory conversations and things like
Anything.
that. And that's when the
Yeah.
whole thing about encryption and tokenization really comes into
Totally.
effect.
Security protocols have to be very stringent moving forward, and they have to keep on adapting eventually, because that's how you stay on the top of the game. And that actually brings us to our next topic, that what are enterprises getting wrong currently? Karthik, to you, what are the most common blockers slowing enterprise AI adoption now today? We have discussed in detail so far that yes, there needs to be a blocker, there needs to be clear cut solutions out there. But if you can give us accurate and perhaps what you've observed, the blockers slowing enterprise AI adoption down.
I think the first blocker is really getting an understanding of what happens to my data. I think there's a lot of ambiguity there, uh, where most decisions have not moved forward with this question in mind.
Yeah.
That what happens to my data? Is my data localized? Is my data going for a training?
Yeah.
Being used for training and things like that. So rather than being in ambiguity and being in a limbo and not going in for AI adoption, start thinking what controls exist today, what platforms exist today, and start implementing those controls so you can quickly have the AI adopted in the workplace, right?
Yeah.
So that's the number one blocker. Second is regulatory compliance and regulatory matters around, governance, policy, and the DPDP Act in India. What happens to what should I be doing to comply to some of these regulatory guidelines, laws, etc., etc. There, I think coming back to where we started on governance, I think it's really important for organizations to not just have AI governance, AI policy on paper, but to really operationalize it. To Amrita's earlier point, have a complete visibility of all the AI assets that are being spawned, provisioned on the fly.
Correct.
Like it's not like a traditional IT asset, right? You can spin off models, you can, developers download models, test it, implement it, provision it off and things like that. So where is your visibility, observability layer in knowing that what's my sprawl of AI assets today?
Yeah.
And then putting in controls around how do I look at all these models are tested, red teamed, follow all the responsible AI, methods and, practices that even some of the leading frameworks ask you to do, like EU AI Act and RBI AI framework. So how do you have that in one place? How do you operationalize? You take policy to code. You take your AI governance and security policy to code, which means operationalize it. And then, have the whole security by design, thinking through, how do I implement security controls right from layer 0 to when I'm architecting the systems. I think that's the
crux of it. So you have to play by the book, but at the same time, you have to be open to adopting at the same time. And you have to keep on building it parallelly.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Skyflow, Amrita talks about protecting data in use.
Yeah.
And if you can give us an insight, what does that exactly mean when you talk about AI systems?
So traditionally, when we've talked about protecting data, we always talk about protecting data at rest. I've encrypted the data, I've protected it. But what happens when you're trying to use this? You decrypt the data, it's all in the open and it's just flowing around, right? That is about protecting it in use. And now, when we talk about protecting it in use in AI, so you're talking about runtime AI data control, right? And what happens is, as the data is moving through all these systems that we've talked about, you need to think about, does this agent, does this tool really need this data for this particular task? You have to start thinking of governance. You have to think of, actually, let's take a step back. You have to think of three things, I would say. You have to first think of sanitizing the data that is going in. So, because most importantly, because now we are working with unstructured data. So, you have to detect where the sensitive data is and sanitize it in a way that the model can work on it but it doesn't know the real data. And that's one of the things that we do with Skyflow, right? Then you protect it, because to all the compliance thing that he's talking about, if you create an agent that is doing shopping for you, it also needs to have PCI compliance. You're not excused from it. You need to have DPDP, you need to have GDPR. Like, the compliances don't go away, they sit with the data. So you have to protect it. And most importantly, you have to have runtime governance. And this is where it becomes very interesting, because with Skyflow, what we've done is, once you sanitize the data, we transform it in a way that we are preserving the context while we tokenize or obfuscate the data in a way that the model or agent or tool can act on it. But most importantly, we make sure the agent sees only the data it needs to see for the period of time it needs to see and for the particular intent and purpose, which is very critical, because now with the swarms that you were talking about, right, you have agent orchestration. So you would have multiple agents working, multiple tool calls, multiple MCP servers pulling in data from different systems. What are you going to do there? Agents are passing data from one agent to the other. If there is a shopping agent, but I've asked it to just browse, does it need my credit card information? Because I've not asked it to shop, right? It's a complete different, because now what we're doing is we're not only giving data, we want agents to act on us, take action. So that's what we mean by protecting data in use. As agents are using data to reason, to think, to make decisions, to give recommendations, as well as take action, do those, financial transactions or health checks or any of these critical things where it becomes very important. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about runtime AI data.
That's very interesting. We also have to now build upon it because it clearly means that the future of enterprise AI stack is fundamentally changing.
Yes.
And for that, Karthik, we wanted to understand, do you think AI is fundamentally changing how AI enterprises are moving about DPDP and data governance? And B, how do they navigate this change?
I think it's too early to say because the implementations have just started. The final go ahead came a couple of months back
Yeah.
in November. Um, the question has not yet come, or rather, at least I have not had those conversations in terms of, uh, you know, these are my traditional IT data controls, and now these are my AI related data
Yeah.
controls. But when it comes to that, I'm sure it's going to be a lot more confusing and
Yeah.
a difficult challenge for organizations to follow because of all the points that Amruta also mentioned earlier. Um, but I think the thinking has to start now in terms of how do we architect traditional
Yes.
IT vis-a-vis AI systems. But that has to follow along when they are starting to implement certain
Yeah.
DPDP related controls. As of today, there are DPIs that are happening, which is the data protection impact assessment that are
Yes.
taking place, which means organizations have started to assess their systems, their applications, their processes in terms of where which data is getting exposed, highlighted, impacted from a privacy perspective. And the act has different nuances, whether it's
Yeah.
adult data, children's data, and so on and so forth. So as of now, the processes have started kicking in terms of
Yeah.
doing impact assessments. It will soon cover all the AI systems as well. The only caveat I feel, which might become a challenge is again the rate at which AI systems change. These impact assessments will have
Yes.
to be done on a more regular basis
Yeah.
to really find where the
Yeah.
flaws are.
Absolutely. So this clearly happens to be a very interesting roller coaster ride. But to hop on to that roller coaster, Amrita, you are going to help us to understand what exactly does privacy first AI infrastructure look like? Because we are all ready, we're all excited that let's hop on, we'll go have fun. But how do you set it up? What does it look like?
Yeah. Everyone has FOMO, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to miss out. You want to run fast and do everything.
That's what.
I think you don't want to take a very heavy approach, because then you are not going to get out of FOMO, right? You don't want to block, you don't want to do things like that. So I think the first thing you want to think about is, what are the key controls I need to have to be able to hop on this train. Now, I have seen a couple of enterprises do it differently, right? So you may have some enterprises where all of this is being driven by the office of the CISO or the CDO. So what they're starting to do is they are giving approvals to which agents, which AI projects can go into production. And they are doing analysis of like, okay, what is happening, what's going on. And they have put controls. And this is where I say just specific controls, auditing, tracing, to be able to see what's going on. So even if something that's gone to production has a little bit of issues, they can figure it out and then block it, right? So that is kind of the first thing. At the same time, they have always been thinking of data protection in our traditional transactional operational analytical system. They are starting to apply the same thing. So simple things like, let's say you have a fine-tuned model or you have an SLM or something that you're deploying, make sure that the training or the reinforcement learning that is happening on sanitized data. So those are some two really simple controls that can be put for basic things. Then when you go into like actually having powerful agents be out there, that's when you want to have the runtime data controls. So most of the time I tell folks is like there will be guardrails you'll put. You'll have to do evals. There's like technology is moving so fast. Some of these foundation models are embedding a lot of these things. So today you may spend a lot of time writing like, hallucination or toxicity guardrails, and tomorrow the foundation models have embedded it in. So do you want to spend that much time? So I would suggest everyone think privacy first from the principles that you had before AI. What were you thinking about from a security privacy standpoint then? We were always thinking about data, we were thinking about data governance, and we were thinking about security and identity controls. It's the same thing. Start with that, put that in your architecture, so then the actors that are there that can adhere to it. Now there are small changes like Karthik was mentioning, new frameworks have come in. That's why Skyflow also adapted to the AI workflows earlier, where rather than just giving you like a format preserving token for a value which then AI won't understand, we changed it to make sure there is an AI understandable contextual format, right? So there are all those things happening, and you want to put that from the beginning. It doesn't take that much time to put it in. But once you put it in, you will be able to move faster rather than trying to like create an enclave, put everything on prem and like get that whole big monolithic architecture going. So now you can experiment faster.
For like anything in life, the base has to be strong.
Exactly. It's a foundational layer.
So we can say that the vetting has to be top down. That's very crucial. And at the same time, you can't forget the traditional methods that were there, but they have to adapt it according to the age that we're living in.
Yes.
Very interesting. What separates enterprises that are moving very confidently on this AI age from the ones that are stuck?
Yeah. I think what truly separates them is how they think about these two pieces of internal AI versus external AI, right? So enterprises that are doing AI very successfully, when they are thinking of external deployment of AI, whether it is their product or something that they're delivering to their customers, they are making sure that that security trust is not broken. Otherwise, it impacts the reputation of the company. Let's say you have a customer success agent that has suddenly like leaked a bunch of sensitive information. Nobody's going to work with you anymore, right? Same thing on the internal side, because you want to empower your employees. We are seeing enterprises do a lot on the R&D side, on the coding side of the world, and on the business side of the world. And now the enterprises that are doing it right are making sure they are giving governed, protected access of data to these AI agents or applications so that everything can move faster. And those that are struggling are, there are two as things I have observed. One is they're trying to move so fast that they're like, okay, I'm just going to do something, otherwise I'm going to miss stuff in the market. And then they push something in production and they're like, crap, I have to pull it back, right? And then this also happens from a little bit of, sometimes we don't know anything and it's dangerous, but it's more dangerous when you have partial information. And that is what's happening, unfortunately, in a lot of enterprises. We have partial information of the architecture of how these things work. And enterprises who are running with that partial information are struggling a lot because they think they know everything, but they don't until something bad happens. So that's at least what I'm looking at.
No, absolutely. And I think one other point of complexity is that security always seems to be playing the catch up game. uh, the technology comes in first, and then like if you see most security companies offering, say, AI SOC or what have you, are still maturing, right?
Yes.
There's still a lot of need to cover in terms of how effective that product will be. Uh, so that's always come in post facto, I would say, or rather, there needs to be more thinking and engineering that the defenders need to do before actually
Yeah.
rolling out, so that the offensive part and security doesn't really
Yeah.
do much damage. But that's always been the catch up game.
Correct.
But I think what organizations will need to start doing is start thinking what solutions will fit right, and what exists today, so that I can do the right thing and it pans out, in the right shape and form going forward. Um, I'm speaking to 30,000 feet, but that's what the
Yes.
psyche should be, to really not just go full hog implementation and then start
Yeah.
thinking, what I should have done, where a solution already existed, right?
You need to have at least a blueprint of where you're going
Yes.
before you jump into it and start
Yes.
investing and get your
Totally. I mean, how we do in software life cycles, right? You do a POC, you get approvals on the architecture, there's a security review, then you go to production. It's actually no different. It's just that the architecture has changed, the components have changed, and how you do all these things have changed. But the steps remain the same.
The tools have changed, but the principles are the same.
Exactly.
Basically. And that brings us to our closing round for this discussion. What advice, Karthik, would you give enterprise leaders preparing for the next phase of AI adoption? You just mentioned that you see things from 30,000 feet as of now, but you know what? Your view is very crucial, even if it's from 60,000 feet. You're like in a,
No, I think the only advice going forward is that the landscape is going to become even more complex. The systems and the architecture is going to just grow even more, if not just remain the same. So always think security design first, um, and try and map out all the controls beforehand in terms of what can go wrong in any scenario. Like
Yeah.
Amrita mentioned, think what the AI systems are being used for. Is it internal to the organization? Then what are my threats? What are my risks that I'm going to face, etc. If it's external customer facing, AI system, then I need to be 100x sure as to, what is going to be the impact if my AI system is going to fail. And a lot of organizations don't know that if AI fails, the legal implication is not on AI, but it's
Yes.
on the organization, it's
Exactly.
on the CEO,
Yeah.
right? So you have to architect and design security right from the the initial phase zero, but keeping in mind what the application is used for in what scenarios and use cases, and then think through what the second level of thinking is thinking through what controls, products, OEMs that we have
Yeah.
in the market today, and really see how it's going to benefit us, right? Rather than, to the earlier point, stopping innovation.
Yes.
That's not going to work,
Yeah.
because your users, your customers are going to see the change in your competition,
Yeah.
and they are going to either be left behind or they'll switch.
basically clarity of objective so that you have a clarity of result. That's very crucial. And Amrita, we come to you for the closing thoughts. It's very important. What should organizations prioritize immediately from a technology and architecture perspective?
Um, I think the few things I would say you want to prioritize, and I'll harp on this all the time, is think what is happening to your data. Where is it going? How is it getting used? How is it getting transformed? And what data you're generating also, and what controls you have. I think that is one of the key things that I'll say organizations need to think about. The other thing that I think they need to think about is as you are adapting AI, what are the make a conscious decision of what technologies you're going to use and what, like you said, your blueprint of company AI architecture is going to be. If you start doing too many bespoke architectures, managing it, controlling it, doing security on it later is going to be very difficult. So, having your data security posture and your blueprint of your architecture as to how you're going to lay it out and where you're going to put these controls are the two key things I'll tell people to think about that will help them move faster.
So, to all the folks who are building and building aggressively, keep on building, but make sure that you have clarity of your blueprint and you have heard it from the best in the business. Thank you so much to both of you for having a conversation with us, and we look forward to talking to you more. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.